fortunes by means of an income tax and succession duties, both heavily progressive, as also by a direct confiscation of the land in order to subdivide it, and by heavy war taxes levied only upon the rich. The second attempt was to introduce a wide national system of rationality established prices of all commodities, for which the real cost of production and moderate trade profits had to be taken into account. The convention worked hard at this scheme, and had nearly completed its work when reaction took the overhand. And the third was a sort of municipal communism as regards the consumption of some objects of first necessity, bought by the municipalities and sold by them at cost price. It was during this remarkable movement, which has never yet been properly studied, that modern socialism was born. Fourierism with Lang at Lyons, and authoritarian communism with Buonarroti, Babeuf, and their comrades. And it was immediately after the Great Revolution that the three great theoretical founders of modern socialism, Fourier, Saint-Simon, and Robert Owen, as well as Godwin, the no-state socialism, came forward, while the secret communist societies, originated from those of Buonarroti and Babeuf, gave their stamp to militant communism for the next 50 years. To be correct, then, we must say that modern socialism is not yet 100 years old, and that, for the first half of these 100 years, two nations only, which stood at the head of the industrial movement, i.e. Britain and France, took part in its elaboration, both bleeding at that time from the terrible wounds inflicted upon them by 15 years of Napoleonic wars, and both enveloped in the great European reaction that had come from the East. In fact, it was only after the Revolution of July 1830 in France and the Reform movement of 1830-32 in England had shaken off that terrible reaction that the discussion of socialism became possible for the next 16 to 18 years. And it was during those years that the aspirations of Fourier, Saint-Simon, and Robert Owen, worked out by their followers, took a definite shape, and the different schools of socialism which exist nowadays were defined. In Britain, Robert Owen and his followers worked out their schemes of communist villages, agricultural and industrial at the same time. Immense cooperative associations were started for creating with their dividends more communist colonies, and the great Consolidated Trades Union was founded, the forerunner of the labor parties of our days and the International Working Men's Association. In France, the Fourierist considerant issued his remarkable manifesto, which contains, beautifully developed, all the theoretical considerations upon the growth of capitalism, which are now described as scientific socialism. Proudhon worked out his idea of anarchism and mutualism without state interference. Louis Blanc published his Organization of Labor, which became later on the program of Lassalle in Germany. Vidal in France and Lorenz Stein in Germany further developed, in two remarkable works published in 1846 and 1847 respectively, the theoretical conceptions of considerant, and finally Vidal, and especially Pécure, the latter in a very elaborate work, as also in a series of reports, developed in detail the system of collectivism, which he wanted the Assembly of 1848 to vote in the shape of laws. However, there is one feature, common to all socialist schemes of the period, which must be noted. The three great founders of socialism, who wrote at the dawn of the 19th century, were so entranced by the wide horizons which it opened before them, that they looked upon it as a new revelation, and upon themselves as upon the founders of a new religion. Socialism had to be a religion, and they had to regulate its march, as the heads of a new church. Besides writing during the period of reaction which had followed the French Revolution, and seeing more of its failures than its successes, they did not trust the masses, and they did not appeal to them for bringing about the changes which they thought necessary. They put their faith, on the contrary,